Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next Lightning Talk. Today we have Steve Sambach from the head of Spark Digital Studios. Hi, Steve.
Hi Dave, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good, good. Yeah, not too bad. Thanks. Not bad for a Monday.
Yeah, it is a Monday. Yeah, great. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and Spark Digital Studios?
Yeah, so Spark Digital Studios, we our background really is in gaming and developing casino games, for which we kind of use the Unity engine for that and the games engine. And what we're really looking at doing is changing our direction a little bit as a company, going into kind of augmented reality, virtual reality, and using our skills with the Unity engine to kind of do that. And yeah, just kind of head into these kind of new spaces and looking at the opportunities that Web3 has for us as well.
Oh, great. Well, you've teased what I've got you in to talk to us today about there,
There
Steve.
we go.
You've come to talk to us about Web 3.0.
That's
Um,
right.
so I understand you recently attended the Web 3.0 conference that was earlier this year. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting.
so I think the best place for us to start, Steve, because I don't know the answer to this, is what is Web 3.0?
So I guess to kind of answer that, we'll go right back to the early days of the internet, I guess, and kind of Web 1, which is kind of this, the early web. So the idea of just websites, very kind of simple tech by today's standards. And the idea that everyone around the world could access this network, the World Wide Web, for the first time, and find out about businesses and information and so on from across the world. Um, that was then kind of followed up with Web 2, which is more the web as we see it today and as we think of it today. The idea really of everybody being a creator, everyone having their own profiles, and putting up, their relationships or their thoughts or whatever, or via kind of social media. So you think of like things like Facebook and Twitter as the kind of major businesses of Web 2. Web 3 is still in the kind of very early speculation stage. It's effectively a series of technologies that have come across in the last few years that could have profound impact on how we use the web, and how we kind of interact with each other and other users online. And there's a lot of speculation at the moment of exactly how that's going to sort of play out and how these technologies will be used, and which businesses might succeed at doing this and what the impact is. The core idea of it, though, is the idea of decentralizing data. So at the moment, there's innumerable amounts of data, right, on the internet. There's so much information about all of us, a lot of it generated by us, and it's all stored in these databases. And the kind of high level, the way it works at the moment on the internet is major companies own these databases, right? Again, Facebook and Google and Amazon, they all have databases about all of us and our information. Web3 is effectively the idea that that data is stored on what's called the blockchain and stored across many different people, and no one owns it. No one has direct access to it, and so can't really monetize it directly, but rather you have control over your data and you can choose who sees it and who doesn't. And if this sounds kind of high level, then that's because it kind of is at this minute. And in terms of its actual real world application, we're yet to really see. People are speculating on it, but there's no Facebook of the Web3 world yet, because of course it's such early stage right now. But that's probably the kind of best answer I can give you as to what Web3 is right now.
Okay. So you went to this conference. What were your key takeaways from the Web 3.0 conference that you're going to pay attention to and focus on, really?
So yeah, most of it is that the kind of the idea that the web is at this, or Web3 is at this speculative stage, but the sort of concerns that people have and are talking around it, I think, is what's interesting at the moment. I've mentioned privacy concerns, and people think that they can solve this, and it could almost enrich democracies, and it could change capitalism, and there's a lot of kind of positive and buoyant optimism, I guess, around Web3, and people are really talking about it on these very kind of high terms. This idea that you control your data, you can have verified users online, which can kind of almost get rid of misinformation and bots and things which we've seen on the internet lately. A lot of stories about this sort of stuff affecting democracies, affecting elections, and one of the way you win an election now, according to some people, is you just put so many bots online that spread the message you want them to. It can kind of put an end to all of that. So there's this huge kind of buoyant optimism at one side of it. But of course, behind it all, your big investors in Web3 are the likes of Facebook, Niantic, Microsoft, and these are the people that I think ultimately are going to kind of terraform this space and figure out exactly how it works and how the businesses are going to be established in there. So it's very early stages to kind of figure out exactly where it's going to be. But the three most interesting spaces I think to watch are, we've got cryptocurrencies is one, which is kind of probably the more established end of Web3 stuff. In terms of, people know kind of what it is. Most people have an idea about cryptocurrencies. We've got NFTs, which are, I think, the last 12 months, 6 months, we've started to kind of hear a bit more about. And then another concept of zero knowledge proof, which I think is quite an interesting and important one to watch, which I hadn't really heard much about before going to this conference. So that's probably a new one to talk about as well.
You said your three kind of main takeaways were crypto, NFTs, and this zero knowledge proof.
Yeah.
Tell me what crypto is, because to me, crypto is this speculation market where if you've got a few quid, you might go and earn a couple of grand buying Bitcoin, and to me, that's all it is at the moment. But what is it to, like, what are those people talking about it, like, what it really is?
So what a lot of people that are sort of backing it are doing so for rather kind of almost socio-political kind of reasons, a lot of them. They talk about the problems with capitalism, this idea that the government and the banks can control inflation and print more money as they need, and that in their eyes kind of creates a system which can benefit the rich and not the poor. The rich get richer, the poor kind of stay where they are. So there's a lot of talk that kind of cryptocurrencies can solve this, which, as I said, that's kind of one outlook of where it might be. But as you say, it's very kind of speculative at the moment. But yeah, effectively the idea is that there's this money, this currency that's online. It's very hard to steal in a way because it's kind of all in this shared blockchain, which is kind of shared across thousands or millions of computers. And yeah, it kind of, where's the future of it going? We've all heard great success stories that the value of it can go up, can shoot up, it can also shoot down very quickly. So it's a lot more speculative than, should we say, traditional markets and stocks and shares, and certainly things like, the dollar or the euro or the pound, which are kind of established currencies. But there's a lot of talk over it. There's a lot of speculation. We know El Salvador has sort of made it an official currency of their country. And some US states, I think Colorado now accepts cryptocurrency to pay taxes as of last week, I think. Wow. Yeah, it's a growing space. I think there's over 2,000 cryptocurrencies right now on the web from a cursory Google search. So just the number of cryptocurrencies suggests they can't all, in my head, they can't all take off and be massively successful, right? That's more than there are traditional currencies in the world by quite some way. Yeah. So yeah, it's a hugely growing space. I think you will have people with huge success stories from cryptocurrencies, and there are people that really think it can kind of change capitalism for the better, and it could have a really profound impact according to them. But I don't know yet whether you should be putting all your life savings into them just yet. I'm not so sure, because as you say, it does feel a bit like a bubble, and a bubble that could potentially burst as well in the next few years. I'd say it's a really interesting space to watch, as a lot of kind of things of Web3 is. But yeah, quite whether I do much more than watch on a kind of academic level is another matter, I suppose.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and you talked about NFTs. To me, NFTs are just a fancy cryptocurrency, but when we had a conversation the other day, you were saying it's a bit different to that. So
yeah, so the idea of an NFT, you're right. It's on the blockchain, so from a technology point of view, it's a similar kind of thing. The difference with NFTs is that each NFT itself is a unique item, if you will. So therefore, it's different. One Bitcoin is the same as another Bitcoin. It's just who owns it that's kind of varies. NFTs are themselves unique. So it might be a picture, it might be, I guess it could be a sound file, it could be a movie, all these type of things. you typically hear of NFTs now, the kind of really earliest kind of versions of it that we've seen and that have kind of got popular are the kind of artwork that you see, right? And people will release huge series of artwork, often computer generated in some cases. And the idea is people try and collect them. So each one of those NFTs will be different from the other. It'll be a different image, and people are trying to collect them. And obviously that's done through buying and selling with Ethereum, so a cryptocurrency. And obviously the hope is that the value of them all goes up over time. And so you can, obviously it's an investment. And that's kind of what people believe. But yeah, it's a little bit different from a cryptocurrency, as I say, in that each one is unique and has its own kind of image or own file attached to it ultimately.
Are there any like real world, like for me, a real world application of this yet, other than this kind of digital trading space?
Yeah, absolutely. It's heading into that space. So we've had this. There was one project that came up at the conference. It was a Shark Tag story, and this was an NFT where you bought an NFT and it related to a real world shark. I think this project was done by a sort of a charity, a kind of oceans charity. And if you bought that shark tag, you got to name that shark and you got to view where it was in the world. I think they put trackers on these sharks, obviously. And so, yeah, obviously you didn't own the actual shark in the real world. And that's kind of the thing with NFTs. You don't own anything kind of substantial. But it was an interesting idea, and it raised a huge amount of money for that charity to help sort of go to protect marine wildlife. But ultimately, when you think about it, you think that's a really great project, but is it really different to just adopting a shark, without using an NFT? And I don't know, maybe not really. We've all got friends with it. We know people who've sponsored tigers or pandas in the wild in a very similar way. This was just the same thing, but with an NFT. But it's starting to kind of capture that kind of real world application, I guess. And there's another project as well that came up, which is called the Super World Project. Again, kind of early stage kind of project, but effectively what they've done is divided the whole of the globe up into, I think it's like 3 meter square patches that you can go and buy, and you can buy each of these as an NFT. So you can buy, for instance, right now you can buy the Taj Mahal for 50 Ethereum, or you can go and buy the Eiffel Tower for about 100 Ethereum. And own those spaces in this digital world. Now, what do you then do with it? Well, they've got an application which you download on your mobile, and that uses augmented reality, and you can see whoever owns the space you're in. The idea is, I think, eventually they can build, features and assets into that space, and anyone that's stood there in the real world can access the AR app and then view the kind of AR version of that world. Again, it's kind of speculative, but I guess, if this world takes off, it has, the idea is you might sell it to businesses that want to advertise in that space, and you could potentially make money from it that way. So I thought that was a kind of interesting project in the NFT space, and one kind of interesting one to watch. And I guess if people have a load of spare money, they might be going around now and buying all, I don't know, the Premier League football stadiums and thinking, right, at some point, if this world takes off and people are using this AR mobile app, holding all of these kind of high footfall areas is probably going to be of value. So that's just one kind of project in the NFT space that I thought was interesting.
Okay, great. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Like how the individuality makes the difference and how it can kind of transfer into a different use from just a currency.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talk in the future of having even more real world uses. So things like house deeds could go on there, or your medical records. If you think about all your medical records are held presumably in databases with various NHS trusts or hospitals and so on that can't necessarily be accessed even by other hospitals here in Britain, let alone around the world. So yeah, people are talking in the future, maybe your medical records become an NFT, and you can share that with any doctor or anyone you need to. And then it's, it doesn't need to be centralized by people who are very reluctant to share it for understandable reasons. And it kind of gives you ownership of your own medical records. Another kind of aspect that NFTs could be used for. Again, that's kind of far in the future. But while this kind of art, the current iterations of NFTs maybe have kind of paving that way by establishing the technology and the uses around it. I guess almost ironing out mistakes. But the future could be very different, and it could have kind of really important uses, I guess.
Yeah, interesting. I always thought, like, for both of them, crypto and NFTs, that what I saw on like social media and everything, like, it was people making a bit of money by building up a buzz about something that makes something popular. But you're right, when you think about, especially with the NFTs you've been talking about, there's different ways to apply them, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, it's speculative at the minute. So I think people with a bit of spare money who are fortunate enough can go in and play around with these NFTs and try and make a bit of money. But that creates a usually as a marketplace, I guess. And then, as I say, it might be, and I think it probably will happen, that will mature and it will become more established, and we'll figure out just how secure this space is. And then maybe, in the future, but people who can't be as speculative, but it's institutions like banks and medical trusts and, as I say, housing deeds, the idea that your building has a physical deed somewhere that you have to go and look up and find it when you want to sell your house. I think all of that could move over onto the blockchain in time. There's a lot of talk about it. I think there will be a future use of NFTs, and the version of it we're seeing now is probably different to what we'll see maybe in 10, 20 years, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, the last thing you mentioned was something called zero knowledge proof. Is that right?
Yes. So this is a term, I'll be honest, I hadn't really come across until I attended the conference. So again, it kind of starts off with a kind of high level concept, but it's this idea that you can allow people, you can kind of validate your data without revealing it, which sounds kind of crazy and profound and philosophical. But the best example I can give is, it's almost like, imagine if a website was asking you to verify your age, that you're over 18 because you're trying to buy some alcohol from it, say. And traditionally, the way that would be solved, even in the physical world, is you would reveal to them what your date of birth is, and they would know, and you'd show them your driving license in a shop, and they could see all your information then, but all they really need to do is validate that you're over 18. What zero knowledge proof allows you to do is validate your information, validate that you're over 18 without actually telling them what your date of birth is. So I guess kind of probably the best way to imagine it working is there's almost like a third person there, and all you do is you're just showing to that third party, look, here's my date of birth, or just here's a date. And the shop is saying, okay, is that more than 18 years ago? And that third party might not know it's a date of birth. It might be the age of a house. It might be, I don't know, when a bank account was established, could be anything. And so, the shop ultimately answers that question, gets what they need from it without finding out more about your data than perhaps you're willing to share. And I guess the example given is about the driver's license. But I think it's kind of going on and looking at the way data is stored on the web right now. And there's a lot of concerns about that, as we've already touched upon. And I think that's what zero knowledge proof is going to be about. It's about people controlling their data and, kind of controlling who has access over it more.
No, interesting. You're right. Like, it's hard to perceive what you're talking about. I can prove it without proving it. You haven't seen anything. You just know it's true. Almost.
Yeah, prove it without revealing it is probably the best way to think of it. But I think in terms of its application, right now, it's kind of hard to talk about because it is still a concept. But I think the idea is that in future, so many people now have a Facebook profile, right? And there could be another, network that comes across that's built on Web3 technology. I think, in fact, it's very likely there will be. And it will use zero knowledge proof to, effectively, its selling point will be that your data is going to be kept, within your control. And once you've got that, you can have verified users. You can't have kind of bot accounts or fake accounts. That's the idea. And that also brings its own kind of benefits, right? Of knowing that everyone on a platform is a real person. And we talk about spreading misinformation and all this side of things that happens on Web 2, happens on the current internet. You'll have this space where everyone's a verified user and they can take control and own their data without that being monetized. That's the vision, I think, of Web 3. A good example, Dave, I was thinking about this the other day, actually. Me and you went, I'm not going to name the venue, There's a lot doing. But we went to a sports venue a few months back, right? And my brother had bought the tickets, so we had the tickets. Legally we owned them. But in order to get them, we had to all download the app for this venue, and we had to all sign up for an account, and we had to all provide our email address and our phone number. And I can't remember if they needed our real world address. And we did all of this just to download and access the tickets that we'd already paid for, right?
Yeah.
And that's the playbook now. I don't name the venue because so many places do this now. That's just how things work in the modern web, right? You're constantly kind of being asked for your data and you're giving it out. Okay. I suppose what this zero knowledge proof and this Web3 kind of shows is people are getting a little bit sick of that maybe, and these privacy concerns are quite real. And I think over time they are going to affect, how people, what people are willing to do, I guess, it's in kind of sharing their data. And as the technology comes along to enable them not to share that, but to have other solutions, I think there will be an expectation of that you can't, as a business now, just expect to be storing all your customers' data and asking them for, phone numbers, email addresses, where do you live, what's your date of birth, unless you actually need that for legal reasons. And so, yeah, I think in terms of how does this affect, businesses and so on right now, it's very tough to sort of say in the next 12 months you'll need to do this because of zero knowledge proof. But it's probably more of a long-term kind of thing to think on is, these marketing practices we have, or this idea that someone's sponsoring us and they expect to be sent back a load of email addresses as an exchange for that. It probably needs to be kind of rethought, I guess. And zero knowledge proof, the idea is that it will allow people to expect that almost.
That's great, and you're right. It is extremely frustrating that every single place you have to sign up again almost with all of your information every time, and you're like, this is like a one-time thing. Like,
go. A sports venue that we're not going to be at every week. We're going to be there maybe once a decade, right? And they just want a data, and I get it. Their marketing department's asking for it. Their sponsors will be asking for it, and it is just kind of the expectation now. But I do think that might change in the future, kind of 5 to 10 years maybe.
Yeah, great. I think you alluded to it, Steve, but I'd like to just clarify for everybody watching. Is there anything you think businesses need to be doing this year in 2022 to do with Web 3.0? Yeah,
I did kind of come on to that. I kind of jumped the gun a little bit. But I think honestly, for the vast majority of businesses, this probably isn't the space you need to kind of write into your plans for the next year or two. It's a very interesting space, I think, to watch from an academic perspective and to read up about and to follow the trends. And I think, again, I've sort of said it, if you've got a little bit of spare money maybe and you want to kind of, buy some cryptos or buy some NFTs, sure, go ahead and, look at doing that. But no, in terms of for most businesses, I don't think you need to be kind of changing anything major or drastic about what you're doing right now. It's probably just a space to watch and to kind of keep an eye on for now. As I said, there's two types of businesses I think that will shape Web3. There's the ones that can kind of terraform it through huge resources, and your Facebooks, your Amazons, your Google, that can throw huge amounts of money and huge amounts of developers at it. And then there's the kind of entrepreneurs and the young businesses that are being built around Web3, and probably a bit more speculative, but coming in with new products and trying to get big through Web3. And that kind of makes sense. I mean, the big beneficiaries of Web2 didn't exist before Web2. Facebook and Twitter, they came up, really. They were new businesses that took advantage of Web2. So I think they're the kind of businesses that really need to pay attention to this and act now. But for the vast majority of established businesses, I think we're still a good few years away from really understanding enough about the landscape to figure out what the playbook is and how you kind of react to it.
Oh, great. Well, thanks, Steve. Talking to you today has been really useful. I've learned a lot, especially about the applications of NFTs for me, like how in the real world that means something for users and people and businesses, rather than just this speculation market that I kind of understood it to be until this point.
Essentially.
Sorry, Steve.
No worries. Yeah, I was just potentially that it's an interesting one to watch. I think a lot of this it's forming is kind of the way I'd say, and that's interesting to watch and just try and sort of figure out, okay, where's it going to be in the future, and we'll know all the answers in 15, 20 years, I guess.
Well, we'll have to catch up in 15 or 20 years, Steve, and rewatch this video and do a reaction to what your thoughts were.
Yes. I'm sure I got it all horribly wrong, but there we go.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for watching today. Subscribe to find out any more about our lightning talks or any other content we're putting out. And then thanks, Steve, for taking your time to talk to me about Web 3.0.
No worries. Thank you everyone for watching, and thanks, Dave, and catch up soon.
See you soon. Bye.
See ya. Bye.